Michael Reed had never imagined his life would turn out this way. Just a few years earlier, he had been a man with big plans, a young husband full of energy, dreaming about a perfect future with his wife and their newborn baby. But life had other ideas. When his wife passed away after a sudden illness, Michael was left standing in a quiet house with only his daughter, Emma, in his arms. Emma was only 6 months old at that time. Michael could still remember the way she looked at him with wide brown eyes that seemed to say, "Don't give up." He didn't give up. He worked harder than ever, but the journey was not easy. Raising a child alone, managing work, and carrying the weight of grief left him tired most days. Now 6 years later, Michael had become both father and mother to Emma. His days were filled with routines, waking her up for school, preparing breakfast, making sure her little backpack had everything she needed, dropping her off, and then rushing to his job as a mechanic in a small repair shop. Life was steady, but it wasn't easy. Still, whenever Emma laughed or hugged him tightly, Michael knew he was doing something right. Emma, with her playful spirit, was the reason he kept going. She loved coloring, telling him endless stories about her school friends and asking questions that made Michael laugh. She often asked him, "Daddy, why don't you smile more? You have a nice smile." Michael always gave her a soft smile in return, though deep inside, he felt like something was missing. While Michael built his quiet, hard-working life, in another corner of town lived Rachel Adams. Rachel was a bright and caring woman in her early 30s. She worked as a school counselor, guiding children through their problems and encouraging them to believe in themselves. On the outside, she seemed to have it all together. Calm voice, patient smile, and an ability to make children feel safe. But behind her calm face, Rachel carried her own scars. A few years earlier, she had been deeply in love with someone she thought would be her forever, Daniel. They had been engaged, planning a wedding, and dreaming of a house with white fences and happy evenings. But one day, Daniel decided he wanted something else. He walked away, leaving Rachel with a broken engagement ring and shattered confidence. Rachel picked herself up slowly. She poured her heart into her work, learned to hide her pain behind her gentle smile, and told herself that one day she would heal. But love? That was something she no longer trusted easily. Fate, however, has a way of bringing two broken people together. One Friday afternoon, Michael rushed into the elementary school to pick up Emma. He was late because of extra work at the shop, and he hated being late. He didn't want Emma to ever feel like she wasn't important. When he arrived, Emma was sitting in the counselor's office, drawing on a piece of paper. Beside her sat Rachel, watching patiently. When Michael walked in, slightly out of breath, Rachel looked up. Their eyes met for the first time. Michael gave a quick apology, embarrassed by his delay. Rachel smiled kindly, her voice calm and warm. "It's all right, Mr. Reed," she said. "Emma was just keeping me company. She's a wonderful little girl." Michael nodded and gave Emma a hug. Emma giggled, showing her drawing to both of them, a picture of herself holding hands with her dad. Rachel's eyes softened. That moment was small, but it left an impression. Rachel noticed the tiredness in Michael's eyes, but also the deep love he had for his daughter. Michael, on the other hand, noticed Rachel's gentle presence and the way she spoke to Emma with genuine kindness. Over the next few weeks, Michael saw Rachel a few more times. Sometimes Emma wanted to show her counselor new drawings. Other times, Rachel came by the classrooms while Michael waited. Each time their conversations grew a little longer. Michael wasn't a man who opened up easily. Years of pain had taught him to keep his heart guarded, but something about Rachel made him feel comfortable. She asked about Emma, encouraged him about parenting, and listened without judgment. Rachel, too, found herself drawn to Michael's quiet strength. She could see the effort he put into raising Emma alone. There was no bitterness in him, only determination to give his daughter a good life. That kind of love touched Rachel more than she expected. Still, neither of them thought too much about it. Life had already taught them both to be careful. One chilly evening, after Michael picked up Emma from school, Rachel happened to be walking to her car in the parking lot. Emma spotted her and called out, "Miss Adams." "Look, Daddy got me new crayons." Rachel walked over, laughing softly. "That's wonderful, Emma. I can't wait to see what you draw with them." Michael stood nearby, watching the way Rachel and Emma talked like old friends. For a moment, he wondered how easily Rachel fit into their small circle. The thought surprised him. Later that night, after Emma had gone to bed, Michael sat by the window thinking. He rarely let himself think about companionship or love, but Rachel's kindness kept replaying in his mind. He pushed the thought aside. He had responsibilities. He couldn't risk his heart again. Rachel, meanwhile, lay in her apartment staring at the ceiling. She remembered the way Michael had looked at Emma, so protective, so proud. She thought about his soft smile, the kind that appeared only when Emma did something funny. Rachel had seen many parents, but there was something rare about Michael. Days passed, turning into weeks. Slowly, a fragile thread of connection began weaving between them. It wasn't romance, not yet. It was respect. It was quiet admiration. It was two wounded hearts noticing each other from a distance. Then one afternoon, Rachel received an unexpected letter in her mailbox. It was an invitation to a wedding. Her heart froze when she saw the names written in elegant letters. Daniel and Claire Daniel, her ex-fiancé. The man who had once promised to love her forever. He was getting married, and he had sent her an invitation. Rachel sat on her couch holding the card, her chest tightening. A storm of memories flooded back, the proposal, the plans, the heartbreak, the tears. And now he was moving on. She should have been angry. She should have ignored it. But all she felt was a sharp ache. Why did he want her there? Was it to prove he was happy without her? Or was it just formality? Rachel's hands trembled. She didn't want to go. Yet deep inside, something told her she had to face it. She had to prove to herself that she was stronger now. But could she walk into that wedding alone? Her thoughts wandered back to Michael, the quiet single dad who never gave up on his daughter, the man who carried pain but never showed bitterness. For some reason, the idea of asking him to be her date crossed her mind. It sounded crazy. Why would he agree? They were not close. They were barely friends, but Rachel couldn't shake the thought. She needed someone steady, someone who wouldn't judge her, someone who understood brokenness. And Michael was exactly that. That night, Rachel sat by her desk staring at her phone. Her fingers hovered over the screen, unsure if she should send the message. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "Just ask." And with that, she typed a simple message. "Hi, Michael. I know this might sound unusual, but would you consider being my date to a wedding? I'll explain everything when we meet." She pressed send before she could change her mind. Across town, Michael's phone buzzed. When he read the message, his brows furrowed in surprise. A wedding? A date? He didn't understand. But something in Rachel's tone told him it wasn't just about attending a celebration. It was deeper. Michael sat in silence, staring at the message, not knowing that this simple invitation was about to change both of their lives forever. Michael sat on the edge of his couch, holding his phone in his hand, staring at Rachel's message for the 10th time. He wasn't sure what to think. He had been asked for a lot of things in his life: help fixing cars, advice about single parenting, or even last-minute babysitting favors from neighbors. But being asked to be someone's date at a wedding? That was new, and not just anyone's request. It was Rachel's, the school counselor who had been nothing but kind to him and Emma. He rubbed his forehead, trying to make sense of it. Why would she ask him? They weren't close. They talked sometimes at school, shared small conversations, but this felt different. It felt personal. Michael thought about ignoring the message, but he couldn't. Something in the way she worded it, hesitant yet honest, made him feel that it wasn't just about going to a wedding. There was more behind it. Finally, after a long pause, he typed back a short reply. "Sure, let's talk tomorrow. We'll figure it out." Rachel sat in her apartment, staring at his response with relief. She hadn't expected him to agree so easily. Her heart still raced, wondering how she would explain everything. But at least he didn't refuse. That was a start. The next day, after dropping Emma at school, Michael spotted Rachel waiting near the counselor's office. She smiled softly when she saw him, though he noticed a nervous edge in her eyes. "Thanks for agreeing to meet," she said. Michael gave a small nod. "No problem. So, what's this about?" They stepped outside, walking along the schoolyard where children's laughter filled the air. Rachel took a deep breath, gripping her hands together as if steadying herself. "It's about a wedding," she began slowly. "My ex, he's getting married, and he sent me an invitation." Michael looked at her quietly, his brows lifting slightly. She continued before he could say anything. "I don't want to go alone," Rachel admitted. Not because I care about him anymore, I don't, but it's complicated. There will be people there I used to know. People who saw me at my lowest, and I don't want to stand there by myself, looking like I never moved on. Her voice cracked slightly at the end, and Michael could sense the weight in her words. He wasn't the kind of man who gave advice easily, but he understood pain when he saw it. "So you want me to go with you?" he said carefully. Rachel nodded. "Only if you're comfortable. I know it's asking a lot. But you're steady, Michael. You're safe. I don't feel judged around you." Michael looked down at the ground, processing her words. He had never been anyone's date since his wife's passing. The thought of attending a wedding, a place full of love and promises, felt like reopening an old wound. But at the same time, he saw how much it mattered to Rachel. She wasn't asking for romance. She was asking for support. Michael let out a slow breath. "All right. I'll go with you." Rachel's eyes softened with gratitude. "Thank you. I can't tell you how much this means." Michael gave a small shrug, though inside, he felt a strange mix of emotions, nervousness, hesitation, but also a sense of purpose. Over the next few days, the idea of the wedding lingered in both of their minds. For Rachel, it was a storm of old memories. She would open her closet and wonder what dress would make her look confident. She would imagine walking into the hall where Daniel, her former fiancé, would be smiling beside his bride. Each time the thought made her chest tighten, but she reminded herself she wouldn't be alone. Michael would be there. For Michael, the thought of the wedding brought back his own ghosts. He remembered his own wedding day, how young and full of hope he had been, how he had believed that love could conquer everything. That memory was now bittersweet. He hadn't stepped into a wedding hall since then, but somehow the idea of being there for Rachel made it feel less heavy. Emma noticed her dad seemed distracted. One evening, while coloring at the kitchen table, she looked up and asked, "Daddy, are you okay? You look serious." Michael gave her a gentle smile. "Just thinking about something, kiddo." "Is it about Miss Adams?" she asked innocently. Michael blinked in surprise. "Why would you say that?" Emma shrugged, her little hands busy with crayons. "Because you smile when you talk about her." Michael didn't answer, but her words stayed in his mind. A few days later, Rachel and Michael met again at a small cafe to discuss details. Rachel wore a simple blue dress, her hair tied neatly, though her hands kept fidgeting with her coffee cup. "So," Michael began, "what exactly do you need me to do at this wedding?" Rachel chuckled softly, a little embarrassed. "Just be by my side, smile when people look at us. Maybe dance with me once so it doesn't look awkward." Michael raised his brows. "Dance?" Rachel blushed slightly. "Only if you're okay with it." Michael leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "It's been a long time since I danced," Rachel smiled gently. "Same here." There was a pause, not uncomfortable but filled with unspoken thoughts. For the first time, they were not just a counselor and a parent. They were two people sitting across from each other, sharing vulnerabilities. "Why did you really ask me?" Michael asked suddenly. His voice was low, but his eyes were steady on hers. Rachel hesitated, then spoke softly. "Because you know what it feels like to be broken. You understand. And I trust you." Her honesty caught Michael off guard. He wasn't used to being trusted so openly. For years, his world had been about survival, about making it through each day for Emma. To be seen, truly seen, was something he hadn't expected. He gave a small nod. "All right then, I'll do my best." Rachel's eyes shimmered with relief. That's all I could ask. As the wedding day drew closer, both felt a quiet tension building. For Rachel, it was about facing her past. For Michael, it was about stepping into a world he had long avoided. Neither of them said it aloud, but deep down they both wondered, could this be the start of something they didn't see coming? For now, it was just a promise to stand beside each other on a day that would test them both. And though neither of them knew it yet, what Rachel would discover at that wedding would not only bring back tears but also open doors to truths she never expected. The morning of the wedding arrived faster than Rachel expected. She stood in front of her mirror, staring at the dress she had chosen. It was a soft lavender color, not too bold but elegant enough to make her feel confident. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the necklace around her neck. No matter how much she told herself she was strong, her heart still raced with nerves. For Rachel, this wasn't just a wedding, it was walking into a room full of old memories. A room where she once thought her future was waiting. She took a deep breath, whispering to her reflection, "You're not the same person anymore. You're stronger now." Meanwhile, across town, Michael stood in his small bedroom buttoning his shirt. He wasn't used to dressing up. Most of his days were spent in grease-stained work clothes at the repair shop. The suit he wore now felt stiff, but he had done his best. Looking at himself in the mirror, he barely recognized the man staring back. For the first time in years, he looked more than just a tired single dad. He looked like someone stepping into a new chapter. Emma peeked in, her eyes wide. "Daddy, you look handsome," she said with a giggle. Michael laughed softly, giving her a hug. "Thanks, kiddo. You'll be with Mrs. Johnson today, okay?" "I won't be long." Emma nodded, but then she asked curiously, "Is this for Miss Adams?" Michael hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Yes, I'm helping her today." Emma beamed. "She's nice. I like her." Those simple words warmed Michael's heart more than he expected. When Michael arrived at Rachel's apartment to pick her up, he felt his breath catch for a moment. Rachel stood at the door, her lavender dress flowing gracefully, her hair falling in soft waves. She looked nervous but radiant, and Michael couldn't help but notice the strength in her eyes. "You look—" He stopped, unsure of the right word. Rachel smiled shyly. "Different." Michael shook his head. "Beautiful." Rachel's cheeks warmed. She looked at him, taking in his suit the way it made him look taller and more confident. "And you clean up very well." They both laughed lightly, easing the tension between them. "Ready?" Michael asked. Rachel nodded, though her heart thudded in her chest. The wedding venue was a grand hall decorated with white flowers and golden lights. The air was filled with music and laughter, but as soon as Rachel stepped inside, her smile faltered. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on familiar faces. Friends she hadn't seen since her engagement had ended. Relatives who had once asked endless questions about her future with Daniel. She felt their glances now, curious, maybe even pitying. Her chest tightened, but then she felt Michael's steady presence beside her. He gently touched her hand, just for a moment. Not enough to draw attention, but enough to remind her she wasn't alone. Rachel looked at him gratefully. He gave her a small nod as if to say, "You've got this." Together they walked into the hall. When Rachel finally spotted Daniel near the front, standing with his bride, her breath caught. He looked almost the same, tall, confident, charming. He laughed as he greeted guests, his arm wrapped proudly around his bride, Claire. For a moment, old memories tried to rise in Rachel's mind, but she quickly pushed them away. Michael noticed the flicker in her eyes and leaned slightly closer. "Remember, you don't owe anyone here anything," he whispered. Rachel exhaled slowly, grounding herself. Guests came by to greet them, some offering polite smiles, others raising eyebrows as if surprised to see Rachel there with someone. Rachel introduced Michael simply as a friend, though the warmth in his presence made the word friend feel deeper. One woman leaned toward Rachel and whispered, "You look happy. I'm glad you've moved on." Rachel forced a smile, though her heart clenched at the assumption. But Michael's calm gaze steadied her once again. As the ceremony began, Rachel sat beside Michael, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She listened to the vows, words she once thought she would hear from Daniel. Instead, another woman stood there smiling with love in her eyes. Rachel felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back quickly. Michael noticed and quietly offered her a handkerchief. She took it, her fingers brushing against his, and gave him a grateful smile. She whispered, "I didn't think this would be so hard." Michael's voice was gentle. "You're here. That's brave enough." When the ceremony ended and the reception began, music filled the hall. People gathered around tables, laughter and conversation echoing. Rachel tried to blend in, but she still felt the weight of people's eyes. Then unexpectedly, Daniel himself walked over. "Rachel," he said, his voice smooth but carrying a hint of awkwardness. Rachel stiffened. But before she could respond, Michael stood up slightly, his presence strong beside her. Daniel's eyes flickered to him, then back to Rachel. "I'm glad you came," Daniel said. "It means a lot." Rachel forced a polite smile. "Congratulations, Daniel. I wish you both well." Her voice didn't shake, and that alone made her proud. Daniel nodded, gave a half smile, and walked away. Rachel let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Michael leaned closer. "You handled that better than most people would." Rachel chuckled softly, though her eyes were damp. "I don't feel like it." "But you did," Michael said firmly. Later, as music played and couples filled the dance floor, Rachel sat quietly, watching. She hadn't danced in years. Then she felt a tap on her shoulder. She looked up to see Michael, his hand extended. "Want to?" he asked simply. Rachel blinked in surprise. "You said you don't dance." Michael gave a small smile. "For you, I'll try." Her heart softened. Slowly, she placed her hand in his and let him guide her to the floor. The music was slow, gentle. Their steps were a little clumsy at first, but then they found a rhythm. Rachel felt her nerves ease, her body relaxing in his steady hold. For a moment, it wasn't about the past or the people watching. It was about this, two broken souls finding comfort in each other's presence. As the song ended, Rachel pulled back slightly, her eyes shining. "Thank you, Michael, for everything." Michael looked at her quietly, his voice low. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad I could be here." Rachel smiled, though deep inside she felt something shift. She had asked him for help, but what she found was more than that. His presence wasn't just comfort, it was hope. And as the night went on, Rachel couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, this unexpected chapter was only beginning. The wedding reception grew livelier as the evening went on. Laughter filled the air, glasses clinked, and the dance floor stayed busy. Rachel sat beside Michael, trying to hold herself together. On the outside, she smiled politely whenever someone came to greet them, but inside, her emotions churned like a storm. Every corner of the hall reminded her of the past. Faces of people who once congratulated her on her engagement to Daniel. Whispers of old friends who knew how suddenly it had ended. She had thought she was ready to face all of this, but the reality felt heavier than she imagined. Michael noticed her silence. "You okay?" he asked gently. Rachel gave a small nod. "Just remembering." "You've made it this far," Michael reminded her. "That takes strength." His words gave her a small anchor, though her heart still ached. Later that evening, Rachel excused herself to get some fresh air. The hall had started to feel suffocating. She stepped outside into the cool night, the sound of laughter fading behind her. Taking a deep breath, she tried to steady her racing heart, but then voices reached her ears. Around the corner of the garden, two guests were speaking in hushed tones. Rachel didn't mean to eavesdrop, but when she heard Daniel's name, her body froze. "I still can't believe Daniel married so quickly," one voice said. "After what he did to Rachel," the other voice replied. "You mean how he left her when things got tough? I heard she wanted children right away and he got scared, said he wasn't ready to be tied down." Rachel's stomach tightened. She gripped the edge of the wall for support. The first voice lowered. "And now look at him. Claire's already expecting. He told me earlier tonight. Can you imagine?" He walked away from Rachel because he didn't want the responsibility, and now he's celebrating the same thing with someone else. Rachel's chest tightened painfully. She stepped back quietly before they noticed her, her breath shaky. She pressed her hand against her heart, feeling the sting of betrayal all over again. So that was the truth. Daniel hadn't left because they were incompatible, as he once told her. He had left because he wasn't ready for the life she wanted. And now, here he was, living that very life with someone else. Tears blurred her vision. Michael was still at the table when Rachel returned. One look at her face and he knew something was wrong. Her eyes were red, her shoulders tense. He stood up quickly. "What happened?" he asked softly. Rachel shook her head, trying to compose herself, but the words spilled out. "He left me because he said he wasn't ready for a family. That's what he told me. But tonight I found out his wife is already expecting." Her voice cracked as tears finally escaped. He didn't want it with me." Michael's heart ached at her words. He didn't try to give quick answers or false comfort. Instead, he placed a steady hand on her shoulder and guided her away from the crowd, toward a quieter corner of the hall. There, away from curious eyes, Rachel finally let go. Her tears fell freely, her voice breaking. "Was I not enough? Was I that easy to walk away from?" Michael shook his head firmly, his voice calm but strong. "No, that's not about you, Rachel. That's about him. People make choices because of their own fears, their own weakness. It doesn't mean you weren't worthy." Rachel looked at him through her tears. His steady gaze, his calm voice, his presence, it was exactly what she needed. She leaned into him slightly, and without hesitation, Michael wrapped an arm around her shoulders, letting her rest against him. For a while, neither of them spoke. The music inside continued, faint through the walls, but in that quiet corner, there was only the sound of Rachel's soft sobs and Michael's steady breathing. After some time, Rachel pulled back, wiping her eyes quickly. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to fall apart like this." Michael shook his head. "Don't apologize. You've been holding this in for a long time. You're allowed to feel it." Rachel gave a small, broken smile. "You're good at this. Being calm, being solid." Michael shrugged slightly. "I've had my share of breaking down. I just learned how to stand again." Rachel looked at him closely, remembering what she knew of his story. A man who had lost his wife, who had raised his daughter alone, who carried his pain quietly. Suddenly she realized that he wasn't just comforting her out of kindness. He understood. He truly understood what it felt like to lose something precious and keep going anyway. Her heart softened in a way she hadn't expected. They eventually returned inside, but Rachel stayed close to Michael. Whenever someone looked at her with curiosity, she no longer felt exposed. His quiet presence was a shield. When the bride and groom made their rounds to greet guests again, Rachel stood tall, no longer trembling. She congratulated them calmly, and though her heart still ached, she felt stronger. At one point, Michael leaned closer and said, "You don't owe him your tears anymore. Save them for people who deserve them." Rachel's eyes glistened, but this time not only with sadness. There was gratitude too. As the evening came to an end, Rachel and Michael walked out together. The night air was cooler now. Stars scattered across the sky. Rachel held her shawl tightly around her shoulders, her steps slower as if she was reluctant to leave this moment behind. "Thank you," she said softly, "for being here, for everything." Michael looked at her, his expression steady. "You don't have to thank me. I just didn't want you to go through this alone." Rachel smiled faintly, her heart warming. She realized that when she had asked him to be her date, she had only hoped for someone to stand beside her. But what she found was far more. A quiet strength, a presence that made her feel safe in a way she hadn't in years. As they reached the car, Rachel looked up at Michael. "I don't know what I would have done tonight without you." Michael paused, then answered simply, "You're stronger than you think, Rachel. You would have made it, but I'm glad I could be here." Rachel's eyes filled again, but this time the tears felt different. Not just pain, but release. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like the broken one left behind. She felt like someone who could start again. And as Michael opened the car door for her, Rachel knew that this night, painful as it was, had changed something deep inside her. She came to the wedding expecting closure from her past. What she found instead was the beginning of something she never expected. The morning after the wedding, Rachel woke up feeling lighter, though her mind still swirled with the memories of the previous night. She sat at her kitchen table, sipping coffee, her thoughts wandering to Daniel's words, the guests' glances, and Michael's steady presence beside her. She realized something important. The wedding had not broken her. In fact, it had shown her something she hadn't expected, how much support and care could mean when someone faced difficult emotions. Michael, meanwhile, had returned to his routine, but he hadn't forgotten the quiet moments of the evening. Even while working at his repair shop, his mind wandered to Rachel, remembering the way she had leaned on him when her heart ached. A few days later, Rachel stopped by the shop to drop off Emma, who had a small project to share. Michael greeted them warmly, wiping grease from his hands. Emma ran to him excitedly, showing off a drawing of her family, Michael, herself, and even Rachel in the picture smiling together. Rachel couldn't help but laugh softly. "I see I've made it into your family art, Emma." Emma beamed. "Of course. You help Daddy a lot. You're like part of our team." Michael smiled at the scene, a warmth spreading in his chest. He glanced at Rachel, noticing how her eyes lit up for Emma, and a small pang of something unspoken stirred inside him. It wasn't just appreciation. It was admiration, the kind that grew quietly when someone truly cared for another. Rachel looked at him, feeling a sudden shyness she hadn't expected. The wedding had shown her that Michael was more than a friend. He was someone she could rely on, someone who saw her without judgment, someone whose quiet strength made her feel safe. That afternoon, they went out to a nearby park with Emma. The air was crisp and clear, and children played on the swings while parents chatted nearby. Rachel and Michael sat on a bench watching Emma chase a butterfly. You know, Rachel said after a while. I thought I'd feel worse after the wedding. I thought seeing Daniel happy would hurt me more. Michael looked at her curious. And? She smiled softly. It didn't, not really. Not because I'm over it entirely, but because I had someone there with me. Someone who didn't judge. Someone who didn't let me fall apart alone. That made all the difference. Michael's gaze softened. I'm glad I could be that person. But it was all you, Rachel. You chose to face it. You chose to go. Her eyes met his, and for a moment neither spoke. There was an unspoken connection, something quiet but strong that stretched between them. It wasn't romance, at least not yet, but it was something significant, something rare. Emma ran back to them, holding a small leaf like a trophy. Look what I found. Daddy, Miss Adams, isn't it pretty? Michael and Rachel both laughed. Michael ruffled her hair gently. It's beautiful, Emma, just like your heart. Rachel watched him interact with Emma, the natural ease, the gentle humor. She felt a surge of warmth and admiration. It wasn't just the support he had shown at the wedding. It was how he carried himself every day. He was kind, patient, dependable, and real. Over the next few weeks, Rachel found herself seeking Michael's company more often, under the pretense of Emma-related activities. They went to the park, visited a library for story time, and even cooked simple meals together at Rachel's apartment, while Emma giggled and played around them. Each time, Rachel noticed little things about him. The way he concentrated while fixing something, the way he listened without interrupting, the small acts of care he gave to both her and Emma. Slowly, her admiration deepened into something more, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Michael, on his part, also found himself thinking about Rachel more than he expected. He admired her resilience, her gentleness, and the way she cared for Emma. He realized he looked forward to their time together, not because of obligation, but because her presence brought a calm he hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, after a long walk in the park, Rachel and Michael sat on a bench, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Emma was playing nearby, her laughter echoing through the quiet. Rachel exhaled slowly, letting the warmth of the moment settle in. You know, she said softly, I think I finally understand something. Michael looked at her. What's that? That it's okay to let someone in, to trust, to lean on someone without feeling weak. Her voice was quiet but steady. I never thought I'd feel that again. Not after everything. Michael's eyes softened. You're allowed to feel that, and you don't have to do it alone. Rachel glanced at him, her heart skipping slightly. You've shown me that, more than anyone has in a long time. There was a pause, a comfortable silence filled only with the sounds of nature and Emma's laughter. Rachel felt a mix of gratitude and something deeper, something she didn't want to name yet but couldn't ignore. Michael cleared his throat lightly. You know, Rachel, I never expected to meet someone like you. Not someone who could understand life's weight and still carry kindness around. You've reminded me what it feels like to care for someone besides Emma. Rachel's heart fluttered, but she looked down, trying to mask her sudden warmth. I think I understand what you mean. The moment lingered, both aware of an unspoken feeling growing between them. It wasn't forced or sudden, it was quiet, slow and undeniable. That evening, as Michael drove Rachel and Emma home, the car was filled with a comfortable silence. Emma was asleep in the back seat, exhausted from a long day. Rachel glanced at Michael, the city lights reflecting softly on his face. Thank you again, she said quietly, for being there. Not just at the wedding, but everything after. Michael gave a small smile, his hand steady on the wheel. I told you you don't owe me anything. I'm glad I could help. Rachel looked down, then back at him. I think I've realized something important. That sometimes letting someone in isn't weakness, it's courage. Michael's eyes met hers, steady and kind. It takes courage, and I can see it in you. Rachel felt her heart warm in a way she hadn't expected. She knew their journey wasn't about rushing into anything. But she also knew that something had shifted, something gentle yet strong, had begun between them. As she opened the door to her apartment, she paused and looked back at him. See you soon, Michael. He nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. See you soon, Rachel. That night, as Rachel tucked Emma into bed, she thought about the past few weeks, the wedding, the difficult truths, Michael's steady support. She realized that while some doors had closed painfully, a new one had opened quietly. And this time, it wasn't about loss or heartbreak, it was about hope, trust, and the possibility of finding something meaningful again. And somewhere in her heart, she felt a small, steady flame of warmth for Michael, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself in years, but one she was beginning to embrace. A few weeks after the wedding, life had settled into a quiet rhythm for Rachel, Michael, and Emma. The heavy emotions of the wedding night had faded, leaving a calm sense of clarity in Rachel's heart. She realized that the pain she had carried for so long had not disappeared overnight, but she had survived it and in the process, discovered something unexpected. She didn't have to face life alone. Michael had returned to his routine at the repair shop, Emma continuing her playful adventures at school, and Rachel to her work at the school counseling office. Yet there was a new layer to their connection now, subtle but unmistakable. Rachel noticed it in the way Michael's eyes softened when he looked at her, in the quiet moments they shared, and in the ease with which they laughed together. One crisp Saturday morning, Rachel invited Michael and Emma to her apartment for breakfast. The sunlight poured in through the window, warming the small kitchen, and the smell of pancakes filled the air. Emma giggled as she helped pour syrup onto her stack, while Michael quietly flipped the last pancake with careful precision. "You've gotten pretty good at this," Rachel said with a smile, watching him. Michael shrugged lightly, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Practice makes perfect. Besides, I like seeing Emma happy." Emma beamed and Rachel felt a warmth in her chest. She realized that these small, ordinary moments were becoming some of her favorite times. It wasn't grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was the quiet, dependable presence of someone who cared. After breakfast, they sat together on the living room floor, helping Emma with a school project. Rachel glanced at Michael, noticing the way he patiently guided her daughter, encouraging her, listening to her thoughts, and celebrating her little victories. Rachel felt an unexpected wave of gratitude and affection. She remembered the wedding, the fear, the tears, the discovery about Daniel, and how Michael had been there without hesitation, steady and calm. She realized she had been looking for someone like him all along, someone who could stand beside her not just in joy but in hardship as well. Later that day, Rachel and Michael went out to run a few errands, Emma tagging along in her stroller. The city streets were busy with weekend traffic, yet in the midst of it, Rachel felt peaceful. She stole glances at Michael as he walked beside her, noticing the gentle confidence in his steps, the quiet care in the way he looked out for Emma, and the subtle warmth in his expressions when their eyes met. "Michael," she said softly, breaking the comfortable silence, I finally understand something about myself." He glanced at her, curious. "What's that?" Rachel took a deep breath. "I've spent so long trying to protect myself from hurt, from disappointment. I thought being strong meant facing everything alone. But it's not true. Strength isn't just about standing by yourself. It's about knowing when to let someone stand beside you." Michael stopped walking for a moment, turning to face her. His eyes were steady, warm, and attentive. "That's a very brave realization, Rachel, and I think you've earned it." Rachel smiled softly, feeling a weight lift from her heart. She realized that she had earned not only closure from the past but also the right to hope for the future. As the afternoon turned into evening, Rachel, Michael, and Emma returned to her apartment. They sat together on the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. Emma had fallen asleep, tired from the day's adventures, leaving Rachel and Michael in peaceful silence. For a long moment, neither spoke. The quiet was comfortable, filled with a sense of understanding that didn't need words. Then Rachel spoke, her voice low but sincere. "Michael, I don't know what the future holds, but I know that with you I feel safe. I feel like I can trust again." Michael's expression softened and he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Rachel, I feel the same way. You and Emma have brought light into my life that I didn't know I was missing. I've been waiting for a reason to let myself hope again, and I think I've found it in both of you." Rachel's heart skipped a beat. The words were gentle, honest, and full of promise. She looked down, feeling a warmth she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. The following days were filled with small moments of connection, shared dinners, quiet walks, and laughter over little mistakes and mishaps. Rachel noticed how naturally Michael fit into her life, not as an obligation or a solution, but as a genuine presence she could rely on.